Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to our Strategy and Finance Committee meeting of the 10th of April. I would like to call on Councillor Fitzgerald to open with karakia.
No mahara mai whakatau mai kia koutou ngā manuhiri, ko tai mai nei tēnei ata. Ki ngā kai kaunihira, ngā kai mahi o te kaunihira, no rei tēnā tātou e te whare me karakia tātou. Tūtawa mai I runga, tūtawa mai I raro, tūtawa mai I roto, tūtawa mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tākie.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Before we commence into the order paper, I'd just like to cover some housekeeping and extend a welcome to everybody here in the gallery and online. We are having this meeting recorded and it will be live streamed to the Council's YouTube channel. Health and safety, there is some procedures on the screens that explain for fire and emergency. The meeting place is Te Marae o Hine under the clock tower. And we'll head there if we hear the alarm. Health and safety also covers smoking and vaping is prohibited. There is a defibrillator in the foyer entrance, and if there is any incidences, please report them to one of our committee administrators. There are online participants today, so if you can keep your cameras turned on but just your microphones muted. We do have councillors online, and I can see Councillor Hapeta. Kia ora, to acknowledge you. The procedures for the hearings I'll cover once we get to that item, but now I'd like to call for apologies. We do have apologies from the Mayor for late arrival and also an apology for Brent Barrett. Are there any others? I'll move those apologies. Second to Councillor Naylor and invite a vote. That has passed, 11 votes for and none against. Moves us to item 3, notifications of additional items. There are none, unless you want to indicate now. Moves us to item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any? Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Clearing an interest in item 9, please.
Okay. Any other declarations of interest? Thank you. We'll note that. 9 and 10 or just 9? 9 and 10? Kapai. Thank you, Councillor. Item 5 is public comment. Is there anyone in the gallery wishing to speak? There is none. And confirmation of the minutes, that's on page 7. I'm happy to move those. Seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open for any matters arising. There being none, I'd like to invite a vote to receive the minutes. That is passed, 10 votes for and 1 abstention. That moves us on to a series of hearings. The first one being item 7, which is a proposal to grant a licence to council-owned land to Papaoia Pacifica Community Trust. Before we go into the hearings, can I also just cover the procedures for the hearings? 10 minutes for speakers are allocated, and that includes questions from members. Can you speak to the main points as we can confirm that councillors have read your material? Just push the button on the right on the microphone when you come to speak, and please introduce yourself if you have anyone in support and speak into the microphone. So, in relationship to the proposal to grant a licence to council-owned land in Papaoia Pacifica Community Trust, 21 Havelock Avenue, I'd like to call on our submitter, which is the Environment Network Manawatu. Okay. Welcome to come forward. As you do that, I'm going to move the two recommendations on the screen, that the Strategy and Finance Committee hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission, and two, that the committee note the procedures of the hearing of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. I've moved those, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Invite a vote. That's passed unanimously, 11 votes for. Now I'd like to welcome Environment Network Manawatu, and Helen King is going to present this submission. The floor is yours. This is submission number 40 for members.
Kia ora te whanako, Helen King tōku ingoa, and I'm the Communication and Events Lead for Environment Network Manawatu. I am here today in the place of my wonderful colleague Daniel Morimoya. I'm clearly not him. He's got a cold at the moment and wishes not to spread the love. Just a little caveat to that, he's our Manawatu Food Action Network Coordinator, and he has a whole heap more information and understanding than I do. So if I get any curly questions that I can't answer, I'm not going to answer them. And I'm not going to make anything up, but I will find out the answers for you. I have a good working knowledge, and I was involved in helping make this submission as well. Environment Network Manawatu, many of you know, underpins 65 member groups linked to the environment in the area, and we also oversee the Manawatu Food Action Network, which is a collective of 20 to 30 organisations and now over 400 interested individuals who are committed to food security in our city. And we consult with these member groups around our submissions, and in particular, we consulted this time with our Manawatu Food Action Network groups around having a community garden at Bill Brown Park, and we are in strong support of this. We have worked with the Papaioia Pacifica Community Trust for a long time as part of the Food Action Network, and they frequently are in touch with us and attend our huis. They are also part of the Aura Connect Kai Security Squad, are very active within that space. Having a community garden, I think quite specifically for the Pacifica community is very, very important. It means that they can grow things that we might not find commonly in community gardens and that are more kind of indigenous to where and what they would grow normally, and have this space as theirs. And having another community garden in the city is also a really huge benefit. I wondered if there would be a question around, another community garden. As far as we're concerned, the more the better, because obviously this links to improved food security, but our understanding of working with community gardens, especially those in public spaces, which my experience through being the recap coordinator and seeing the community garden in Ashurst, and my understanding of what goes on at Awapuni community gardens, is they're very well run and they really connect and cohese community as well. They're a space which supersedes language quite often, where people can get their hands dirty and converse in a different way and connect over the universal language that is food. So we are in very, very strong support of this. Just another note I'd like to make is I understand there are strong processes around consultation when something has been done on community land. But a question that we had at E&M, and I know this isn't in our submission, so feel free to stop me at any point, is there anything we can do to make this easier at this stage? We all know how important food security is in the city. I haven't read every submission, but I am assuming, maybe wrongly, that there aren't very many strong opinions against making this happen, because it's a good thing. And my question to council is, gosh, do I want to use the word fast track? What can we do to make these processes for this kind of wonderful initiative, which has proven benefit, a bit quicker and easier for everybody? Thank you. I'm ready for questions that I might not be able to answer, but I'll give it a shot.
Thank you, Helen. I'll open it up for members if there are any questions. There being none. Thank you very much, Helen.
Thank you very much.
Great. Now moving into submission number 20, which is Sally Dara from Te Whatu Ora is going to be presenting. National Public Health Service Mid-Central. Welcome.
Kia ora. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Inarani, ko Airani o ko tupuna, I whānau mai au ki Pahi Atua, I noho ana ki Ashurst, ki raro te paimanga o Tararua, ki te taha te awa o Manawatu. Ko Sally Dara tōku ingoa. Thank you for having me here today, and it's a real pleasure to be in front of everybody and to be able to speak about this really important issue. So, ko Waimātou, who are we? It's a little bit confusing because we've all changed our names and structure recently. So I work for the National Public Health Service. We are part of Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora. And what we are interested in is we work in quite a number of spaces. So we work in health protection, which you would have all got to know through COVID. They are about disease prevention and containing of disease, fresh water, air quality, and as relate to human health. So there's a whole pile of things that we're interested in that space. We also have public health nurses who work in schools. They run clinics for students around health needs, and they also are quite active in the immunisation space. And so I am a health promoter alongside my colleague Whale, who's come to support me today. And so what we do is we're about creating healthy environments where the healthy choice is the easy choice. So a really good example of this, where PNCC has been very active, is smoke-free policy and smoke-free outdoor areas. Okay, so we fully support the proposal to establish a community garden at Bill Brown Park. Community gardens help make the healthy choice, the easy choice, from a health point of view. Community gardens can improve health in three ways. Mauri ora, which is healthy individuals, and that's through access to good kai, connection to community. As we know, gardening and that kind of social connection is good for our wairua and good for our mental well-being. Whānau ora, healthy families. So yeah, just kind of the similar kind of things, including connection to our community. The third thing is wai ora, which is healthy environments. And so, as we know, planting of foods and connecting and giving back to the land are also a big part of health. So I've heard from our Pacific community that growing food in Palmerston North is very different from in the islands. Both the types of foods and how to grow them can differ greatly. So this garden is a great opportunity to provide a teaching garden where the community can learn about new vegetables, share growing tips, and also figure out ways to grow the vegetables and fruits and things like that they want to grow from the islands. They can also learn about sustainable practices for the soil here, which we know is different. From a Hora point of view, gardening and connection with the environment are good for our wairua, and learning skills that can be used at home to make a garden and cultivate food is very empowering. The Papaioia Pacifica Community Trust are well placed to hold the licence for a community garden at Bill Brown Park. They're well connected to Pacific people in the community, and as Helen was saying, well connected to other networks that can support, who are involved in community gardens, other agencies who can assist with gardens at home, and also look at research about how to grow those crops better. So, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
Thank you, Sally. I'll open it up for members if there are any questions. There have been none. Thank you very much for presenting today. Thank you. Now I'd like to invite submission number 23, Sanlu Luivai, who is representing Niue Palmerston North community. Good morning. Good morning, Sunny. Okay.
Good morning, Chair, Councillor Dennison. I want to acknowledge Councillor Fitzgerald for opening us with prayer. Councillors, members of the staff of PNCC, and also members of the community, I would like to acknowledge the opportunity to present it this morning. My name is Sunny Liuvai. I'm the chairperson of the Papaya Pacific Community Trust. Thank you to Te Whatuora, Sally, and Helen from Environment Manawa 2, I think, for laying the ground for my presentation this morning and your support for this project. I trust that the council has already read through the submission, but I just want to share some of the information, reinforce some of the information on the presentation, if I can get this to work. Okay. First, I just want to reflect. Confucius, a wise Chinese philosopher, once said, "Give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man how to fish and you feed him for a lifetime." I guess in the context of the project we have, it focuses on growing people's knowledge so that they're able to grow their own kai. But it's not only that, but it's equipping people at a holistic level so that they can do many other things. It's about connecting communities and developing their ability to lead independent lives. So I thought I'd start off with that. Again, just revisiting Papaya Pacific Community Trust. Our vision is an empowered, resilient, and thriving Pacific communities. Our work is based on 5 strategic priority areas, all of which will contribute or align with this particular project. Quickly, some context. Over the COVID period, we find out that there's a lot of hardship and poverty experienced by a good portion of our population. And that was reflected in a demand for food packages, amongst other kinds of support. Even though we have gone past COVID, there continues to be persistent demand for food. And this is further compelled by the cost of living crisis. I think for organizations like ours, the focus now is to move from a model where we provide direct support for communities to develop the community's capacity and capability so that they can do things for their own selves. We're really fortunate that we have worked along a number of partners, 2 of whom are here this morning. But our work actually aligns with the Kai Resilience Strategy, the 4412 document. And the PPCC community guidance actually flows as an action point from the strategy. I want to also, in rolling out this project, we feel confident there's a collective wisdom, knowledge, and capability in the community to be able to support this project. I acknowledge in particular the work of champions like David Mollard and Daniel Morimaya, who has been doing and supporting communities in the project. In particular, research evidence, a paper presented by Associate Professor Chrissy Severinson identified immense social, economic, and health benefits of projects like the community garden. And councillors, I'd like to also impress that this particular project aligns with PNC goals of a connected and safe community, including promoting sustainability and the eco goals. And I guess why I'm here this morning is that it has been a challenge for us to be here. And access to land presents huge barriers for community organizations to be able to do projects like community gardens. There's a whole lot of red tape associated with getting access to land. So again, the purpose of the community garden is to grow the knowledge, capacity, and capability of Pacific families to plant, grow own fresh kai in a sustainable way. Who are our target members? The most vulnerable in our communities. The outcomes, I've taken this from the 4412 Kai Resilience Strategy, but it also aligns with what we have in mind for our project. So the focus really is to grow food security, food resilience, and ultimately food sovereignty. But in addition to that, and as highlighted by previous speakers, there are also other benefits, the therapeutic and health benefits of growing your own food, harvesting from your own efforts. In terms of governance capacity, this project will be managed by members from our Tua Ola program and also the children from the Te Whatu Learning Hub. So it's about also giving opportunities for members in our community to grow their skills and knowledge in managing projects. Cultural knowledge in crops and planting and plant management, we would like also to see that aspect being incorporated in this project. Many of our children do not know what a taro or kumara plants look like. So we intend to sort of integrate this aspect as part of the project. But again, it also looks at promoting, sharing, connections, and a sense of belonging for families who will be involved on the project. So Associate Professor Sorensen highlights that, projects like this cultivates local ownership and a commitment to change. So instead of families continuing to rely on external organizations, it's empowering them to be able to make changes for their families. Very quickly, the Pacific Community Garden Project, phase 1, and we have been in phase 1 for almost a year now. But these are things that we have done. We have the resources are there to implement the project. So at this meeting, I'm really hoping that the council will do grant us the license so that we can move on to phase 2. The project really not only focuses on food production, but it's an education plot whereby we can grow the knowledge of our families so that we can also move on to phase 3, which actually involves producing planter boxes and having families grow their own gardens within their own homes. Phase 4, of course, involves ongoing project monitoring, evaluation to make sure that we attain our project goals, and I guess promoting the longevity and sustainability of this project. Again, we feel really confident and privileged to have worked alongside our partners like Environmental Network Manawatu, MFAN, Oracle Connect, Kai Security Squad, huge growing Manawatu Community Gardens Alliance. I want to acknowledge also the work of PNCC staff, Amy Valls and Salome, who has been integral in guiding and providing support for PPCT. Recommendations again. Council, given the immense benefits of this project, I do ask for support in granting Papaya Pacific Community Trust and our families a license so that we can proceed with a project that will bring immense benefits, not only for our families, but for our beautiful city. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonny. We do have a question queued, so I'll open it up for members. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Kia Sunny, thank you for your submission. Just a couple of quick questions. You mentioned that access to land is a barrier to growing crops. Is that specifically because gardens are getting smaller, or is it more that people are in rented accommodation and don't have the opportunity to plant a garden? Are you able to just expand on that?
Yeah, I think I was making reference in particular to this particular project because we operate on a council land, and it's challenging trying to get a resource consent for any projects. And I guess one of the recommendations I have, not outside the scope of my presentation, is that consideration for council to facilitate a much easier process so that there's a demand for community gardens outside PNCC. But if council, for example, have land, there is a demand out there by our community groups, church groups, have access to land so that they can actually, grow other community gardens for the families. It also opens, income earning opportunities, I suppose, for some families.
So, so your reflection is on the process that you've had to go through to request the license, etc. has been a bit long-winded, maybe?
if there's another word beyond long-winded, yeah, I must admit that it has been extremely challenging
Okay.
to get this project moving forward. All we need is land so that we can grow crops for our families and develop our community's capacity to grow crops. But the tedious process, I suppose, we've found it really, really challenging and frustrating.
Okay, well, thank you for that feedback. I'm sure we'll be taking that on board. Thanks, Mr Chair.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Zebulon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sunny. Thank you for your submission. My question was looking at whether or not you had different age groups that you were specifically aiming your program towards, but you did touch on that with the Matua Ola program leading that out, and especially with children. And I just wondered if you could expand a little bit on the importance of a multi-generational approach to the educational program. What the benefits are you expect to see from that?
Yeah, it is an interesting, the covenants, what we have proposed is a working group comprising of members of young students who are part of our Community Learning Hub and the Matua. I think it's a good marriage between enthusiastic, those with good high energy levels, and with the wise. You know, our Matua have a lot of knowledge, traditional knowledge and experience in growing. So I think that's the merit of what we're proposing for the management of this group. It's about, I guess, connecting young and old people, ensuring that information is being disseminated, but at the same time growing people's social skills amongst other things.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, councillor. Thank you, Sunny. There's no further questions this morning on your submission. Thank you very much.
Thank you again. Have a good day.
That moves us on to submission number 19. Excuse me. Ruth Jackson, I'd like to invite to speak.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Ruth Jackson tōku ingoa. I'm presenting as a member of the community. I'm fully in support of this proposal. From my own life, I know the benefits of gardening for community building and mental health, not to mention the healthy kai that creates. And likewise, I'd like to see more of these kind of initiatives in our community, using resources that we already have that maybe aren't being fully utilised. I think the more we can do this, especially leveraging off existing resources and being creative with council resources to support our communities, the better. That's all from me.
Thank you, Ruth. Now open it up to members if there are any questions. There being none. Thank you very much. That concludes item 7, but that does dovetail into item 8. And I'd like to invite Bryce Hoskins, Group Manager for Property and Resource Recovery, to present the report, the summary of submissions.
Morena councillors, happy to take this report as read. Importantly, this is, I've often talked about this being a 3-step process, and so just acknowledging this is effectively step 2. So you're not actually making a decision today around whether a lease will or will not go there. That'll be in the next paper. This is simply receiving the submissions. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bryce. So one of the ones did relate to fast tracking. How soon would the third report do you see taking, and when's the intention to bring that forward?
That'll be coming in May.
May, thank you. Are there any questions from other members? Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Bryce. Not strictly, I suppose, related to the report, but a couple of the submitters did raise questions about process and pointed to it have been a little bit of a tricky process to navigate. Are we obligated to follow a process by legislation because it's a reserve, or is there scope for making this a bit easier for groups to navigate?
the simple answer is yes. So the Reserves Act does prescribe a process we have to follow. In situations where we don't get any submissions, we can often combine steps 2 and 3 together to try and speed it up. But yes, essentially, unfortunately, we're bound by a process.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bryce. There's no further questions on your report. I'll move the recommendations before us that the committee receive the memorandum titled Proposal to Grant a Licence of Council-Owned Land to Papaoia Pacifica Community Trust. Summary of submissions presented to the Strategy and Finance Committee meeting 10th of April 24, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any discussion or debate. Now I'd like to invite a vote. That is passed unanimously, 12 votes for and against. And just confirming the officer's response, May can be the expected period for the final report. Moves us on to the next item, which is item 9, which is the hearing of submissions, proposal to grant a lease to Te Kohanga Reo o Ngāti Hinioti o Ki Rangitāne o Manawatu Trust, or P Reserve. And there's 2 recommendations before us before we move into the hearings that I'd like to move, that the Strategy and Finance Committee hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in support of their submission, and 2, the committee note the procedures of the hearings for submissions as described in the procedure sheet. Seconded by Councillor Naylor. Any questions before we vote? Okay, now open for a vote. That is passed unanimously, 11 votes for. Just highlighting the key points of the hearing, that there is 10 minutes to speak, and that includes questions of members, and encouraging to speak to the main points and acknowledging that councillors have already read the submissions. The submitter, number 78 is Ruth Jackson, and welcome you back to present on this item. Welcome.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Again, my name is Ruth Jackson. I'm submitting as an individual on this. As a member of the community who has used kohanga reo, both my children were fortunate to attend a local kohanga reo, and the support that we got as a family was amazing. The community building with the parents, we made lifelong friends. And I believe that young families need all the support they can get, and that if the kohanga reo in this initiative has better space and better resources, that can only be good for our communities. That's all for me.
Thank you, Ruth. I'll open it up for any questions from members. There have been none. Thank you, Ruth. Now moves us to submission number 17. Peter Butler, I'd like to welcome forward on behalf of Highbury Whānau Centre. Ngā mihi.
Tēnā tātou, i te whakaro au ka tika ka mihi ki te haukainga, ko Ronald i konei, koutou hoki te kaunihirea i tēnei wā. Ko ai tēnei tuaki nei, ko Peter Butler tuku nei ingoa, he uri no tūwharitō Ngāti Kaupata me Ngaitai, engari ko tipu au i konei, mo te wā rō, i te hāpuri o Highbury, engari i mihi nui, i mihi aroa kia tātou. Yeah, just really grateful to speak, and thanks, Vaughan. Probably the main thing for me really is that I don't see why the council should actually oppose this, mainly because Opie Place for a long time, and that space that they're looking at redeveloping has been a wasteland for many years. And although the Scout Club was there for years, but when that closed down, that area was heavily vandalised. I've lived in that community for 30 plus years, well, probably longer. I'm older than 30, but the interesting thing is that Because of where that space is, it's been deemed as a wasteland because things just get left untouched. The cultural benefits, the educational benefits, the spiritual benefits of a kohanga reo being there is immense. And one of the anecdotal things that I have learnt over the time of working with young people is that there's been a trend in this city of young people that have come through the kohanga and kura kaupapa system. Basically, we don't see them on the radar. So what I believe is that the more young people, especially young Māori, it doesn't need to be just Māori, anyone that go through that system, they don't get caught up in the court system, they don't get caught up in police statistics. You don't see them. Myself and a long-time police officer in that Highbury community, Frank Malt, I posed that question to him one time when he was still working and said to him, Frank, how many young people that you have seen or arrested that have come through the kohanga and kura kaupapa system? And he sat back for a little bit and just pondered it. And he goes, basically none. And we sort of had a bit of a conversation around some of the reasons why. And quickly we came to having really strong cultural identity, being connected to culture and people, but also place. So they respected the place that they came from, but also the mana or the whenua. So the people of the land, but also respecting the environment. So the dynamic educational benefits that come from a space that has been traditionally been a wasteland in the city, potentially being turned into something really positive is just enormous. One of the reasons why I'm supporting is in the early stages of the Highbury Whānau Centre, of the development of the Whānau Centre, Ngāti Hini Aote was one of our staunch supporters. That was from Kui Ka Tate and Pōtaka Tate. And they are from that hapu. And we believe it's just due process and due right to be able to respect that. But also we have seen over the many years, or me personally have seen over the many years, the benefits of kohanga reo. So having a kohanga reo based there that would also be a community marae, a community cultural centre, could be of huge benefit, not could be, would be of huge benefit to not only that community, but to the whole city. That's one of the reasons why I'm here today, to be a kanohi, to speak to that. So that's where I'm coming from. Kia ora.
Thank you, Peter. I'll open it up if there are any questions from members. There have been none, but I also just wanted to acknowledge Frank Malt's work in the community those years ago and your reference to that. So ngā mihi to you too, Peter. Thank you for being here today.
No questions. Kia ora. Good to see all the councillors still here. It's young and older. Reference to Lou. Oh, and kia ora.
Just want to check submission number 86, Nikita Tali, is it? Tahi, is she in the room? Yeah, we understood hasn't attended, so won't be speaking. And in the order paper, we did have the kohanga reo or Te Awhina, who have since advised they won't be presenting today. So that concludes our hearing on this item, so dovetails into the officer's report, and welcome back Bryce Hoskins, who is the Group Manager for Property and Resource Recovery, to present the relevant report summary.
Morena again, councillors. Much like the last paper, this is essentially step 2 in this process. Where this one's a little bit different, I suppose, is it's actually looking at 2 separate leases, one in their existing premise on Tui Park, and then obviously the destination at Opie Reserve. They're seeking to do both at once, really, so a bit of a holdover. So once Opie is completed, then that can they can move over accordingly. But until then, they'll continue to operate from Tui Park. You'd previously made decisions around Opie and changing the reserve status to enable this. So I'm happy to take any questions at this point. Just to be clear, again though, you're not making a decision on the lease today, you're just receiving the submissions.
Yes. Thank you, Brian. So open it up for any members if there are any questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Thanks, Bryce. You've said in a report that you'll be bringing this back on the 8th of May, so that's next month. So that's the point at which we can make a decision about it.
Absolutely, yes.
Is there any further process after that, or is that the end of it then?
No, that'll be the final step in the process, and if you vote in favour of a lease being granted in that paper, we'll do the paperwork and cover off the land lease then.
And what's the sort of timeline after that?
Oh, we can move pretty quickly. My team, Preen, who's just sitting up there, will be coordinating that. Yeah, it'd be a matter of weeks before a lease would be signed by all parties, I would say.
Thank you for that.
Thank you, Bryce. There's no further questions. I'll move the recommendation that the committee receive the memorandum titled Proposal to Grant a Lease to Te Kohanga Reo o Ngāti Hinioti Rangatane o Manawatu Trust. Summary of submissions presented to the Strategy and Finance Committee on the 10th of April 24, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open up for any discussion or debate. Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
That was a dodge. Mr Chair, sorry. Listen, I'd just like to point out, we just heard from the Pacifica with one of the community garden. We've heard now from the kohanga that's, it seems like years that's been running along trying to get put in there. I just wanted to comment on the red tape. It just goes on and on and on. And if there's anything can ever be done about it, we need to clean these things up. I believe it'd be built and running by now. And the same with the garden. I mean, the ground would be turned and it'd be underway. But we just got to drag things out. I just wanted to comment on that, Mr Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. There are no further members wishing to speak, so I'll invite a vote. That is passed, 10 votes for unanimously. That moves us on any submitters on those two topics. Feel free to depart. We're going to be moving into the hearing of submissions for draft Palmerston North Animal and Bee Bylaw. And I'm going to move two recommendations. So that one is also for the draft Palmerston North Dog Control Policy. So we'll move them both together. That the Strategy and Finance Committee hear submissions from presenters who indicated their wish to be heard in relation to those two submission processes, and two, that the committee note the procedure for hearings of submissions as described in the procedure sheet. I'll move the two recommendations, and seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comment or debate. There being none, I'd like to invite a vote. That is passed unanimously, 12 votes for. Now moves us into the submissions, and submission number 31 is Levon Barber, and I'll invite you forward to present. Welcome.
Hello, and thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here to talk primarily about cats. I do feel that the paper did not really cover any real requirements for cat owners, and I disagree with this. Firstly, I'd like roaming cats to be designated as a nuisance, because I don't think that everybody else should have to deal with other people's pets, especially considering that pretty much all other pet owners are required to keep their animals on their property. I also feel that due to the environmental threat cats pose to our native fauna, that the council should also make a long-term guide for cat owners to encourage them to actually be responsible pet owners. I would like to see in the near future a cat curfew instigated, much like other councils around the country have done. But I would also like the eventual goal to be that cats are kept on their owner's property. Recently, we have had the Six Extinctions exhibition at Te Manawa, and it is primarily due to human interference that the majority of the animals in our country are threatened with extinction. A large part of that is one of the other issues I do have on the council website, when you look at instructions on how to not have cats be a nuisance on your property, the council's advice is actually to destroy any habitat for lizards, and considering that 94% of our heptofauna are threatened with extinction, I do think that we should be favouring our native animals, not people's pets. That's it.
Thank you. We have a question online from Councillor Hapeta.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much for your submission. I just wondered how you think a cat curfew would be controlled and monitored by the council.
I think that a cat curfew can be controlled because there are plenty of people out there who currently do trapping for rats, stoats, etc. If a cat curfew is installed, then you can have people in the community also set up cat traps to target stray and feral cats. Additionally, if pet cats are caught, they can be handed to the council. And I think the same thing that happens with dogs should happen with cats. You get one free and then you have to pay a fine.
Thank you. Thank you for your response. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. No further questions. Thank you. Thank you for being here today to speak to your submission. That moves us on to submission number 32, Dr. Christine Sumner from the Royal New Zealand SPCA via Teams online. Welcome today.
Lorena, thank you for having me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I'm going to share my screen. I just have a very brief presentation. I'll take our submission as read, and I'm going to quickly go through some highlights I'd like to focus on and then leave time for questions. So away we go. So first and foremost, SPCA recognizes Palmerston North City as a leader in passing bylaws requiring cats to be desexed and microchipped. And we were pleased to see the proposed draft is lowering the age at which cats are required to be desexed from 6 months to 4 months. There are lots of benefits for desexing cats. We see this at an individual level. So we see an increase in the lifespan of desexed animals. There are reduced spraying and marking, which are considered problematic behaviors by most companion cat owners. We see a lower risk of certain cancers, a decrease in aggression, and reducing of roaming behavior. Importantly, we also see benefits of desexing cats at a population level. And this is where we're talking about that we have too many cats from unplanned litters. And one of the things desexing is essential in doing is helping us break this cycle of cat overpopulation, meaning we just have too many cats that are not at home on laps, happy and healthy with a family. There's stray cats in our communities. And this is a yearly cycle that SPCA and many rescues battle with when we have too many kittens born that are from unplanned litters of companion cats. Importantly, desexing of cats before puberty has benefits for the cat, individual cat. There is a faster surgical time and with less trauma and stress for a kitten from the procedure. There are fewer complications and faster recovery time. There is an actual decrease in risk of mammary cancers if kittens are desexed before they go into puberty. We have an elimination of reproductive emergencies that can happen. So this would be infections that can happen with reproductive organs. We have a decrease in behavior problems, which these are the things that cats do normally that just maybe not be appropriate or welcomed in a home, such as spraying and fighting with other cats. And these behaviors are also, from our point of view, these are linked with shelter surrender. This is when a companion cat owner would bring their cat or kitten to us because they can't cope with these behaviors. We also see this decreased number of unwanted cats and kittens that end up in shelters because critically moving from 6 months to 4 months helps reduce the number of cats who haven't been desexed because they enter puberty before that 6-month window. Kittens can enter puberty by 14 weeks. Now that's not common, but they definitely can enter it before 4 months. So we ask strongly for you to shift that age from required sexing 6 months to 4 months. I am going to now unshare my screen. Importantly, and this is kind of building on the previous presentation, we urge council to, I don't know how you track nuisance complaints related to cats if you track them, but we think this is a really good idea because understanding nuisance in your community really helps get a handle on what exactly is considered nuisance, and then how you can think about potentially efforts to encourage people to keep their cats at home. SPCA advocates for cats to be kept at home, not just inside, but just kept to the property. And this protects the cat welfare, but importantly helps reduce nuisance in communities. But if you don't know what's happening in your community, it's hard to kind of have an idea of how to address it. And then also, if you do take steps to either create a bylaw or to just provide incentives for people to keep their cats at home, it's hard to know the impact of that bylaw. So tracking nuisance and being able to report on that, we would encourage council to do so. And then 2 other non-cat related points that I just want to point out with pigs. We certainly welcome council putting a more welfare friendly message in your requirements for pig housing. Pigs deserve a good life. They deserve to live in environments that they can express themselves. Expressing natural behavior is really important to pigs. So we're happy to see this improvement in the housing and that pigs should be able to express these behaviors and move around and be able to rest and lie in natural positions. We also encourage you to require nesting material to be as part of normal pig husbandry. Nesting is really important for pig welfare because they are very motivated to do this behavior. And when they can't, they get bored, they're frustrated. We see a lot of odd behaviors that pigs can start doing because they can't do this very basic requirement of rooting around in material and building a nest. Additionally, there's one technical point about your clause 14 with slaughtering of stock or poultry. Again, it's great to see welfare being talked about in a bylaw, but we do ask for just tweaking of the language that it mirrors what the Animal Welfare Act says so that the bylaw is consistent with the primary legislation of the Animal Welfare Act. And we offer that suggestion in our document, so probably don't need to go into too many details here. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions related to the presentation.
Thank you very much. Open it up to members if there are any. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Dr. Summers, for your submission. In your submission, you've listed the other councils that have got cat controls. And I wonder if you're able to comment from your perspective of being able to take a bit of a view across the country as to the level of enforcement that happens in other councils of bylaws. Because, you know, I think that's possibly an area of difficulty for us. So I'd be keen to hear your perspective.
Yeah, great question. This is on everyone's mind, and it is, we definitely hear wherever we know that councils are talking about this, they're concerned with passing a bylaw that can't be enforced, or how would that look? My experience, we have seen where councils such as Whangarei have adopted more putting emphasis on compliance. So yes, it's not enforcement per se, but this is a compliance, a softer side of getting that behavior change, because ultimately that's what we want to see with a bylaw. We want to see people change their behavior. And so a compliance officer in Whangarei is a community member, is a community position that they're getting out there and they're helping people achieve that behavior change, because we're quite aware that a bylaw alone is never going to get us out of this situation with cat overpopulation. We have to have support in communities. So as we provided in our submission, this is just the sharp end of the stick. We also have to have people in the community that promote this. This is normal. This is what is expected of you. So the bylaws also set a tone. We've also heard from local rescues who are boots on the ground, talking to individuals, and when they can say, you have to do this, this is a bylaw, their approach to helping people in the community get that cut to sexed, they feel like they have more teeth, they have more support behind them by being able to say this is a bylaw, it's a requirement. So that's that compliance bit, and that can actually be an officer hired by council. We also know that some councils are using this idea that getting the message across is an important part of a bylaw. One thing that I can't speak too much in depth about, but I have become aware that we have seen some changes in behaviors. We know that in some meetings people have discussed Companion Animals New Zealand, which is the organization that runs the companion animal register. So this is where if you have your animal microchipped, you would register that microchip on this charity based register, so that if your cat does become lost, it can scan the microchip number is associated with the owner's information. Where they have seen bylaws passed, increases in the number of cats being microchipped. So it can signal to people, and we do know the research shows a lot of people don't even know they can microchip their cats. So the bylaw can also be educative and informative, and there is a benefit to that. And also from some of the survey work, there is a proportion of people who aren't desexing and microchipping their cats because they don't think it's important or they haven't prioritized it. So I think this is maybe possibly the target audience with a bylaw, that you're raising the profile, the importance of these expectations of what responsible cat ownership is in your community. Again, those aren't these hard enforcement lines. And I think it's worth exploring different ways you could do that. But I'm not too sure anyone has figured it out yet. But it is I think one of the most consistent things that comes out of these conversations when we talk about bylaws.
That's a very helpful answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sumner. That concludes our time. There are no further speakers. I appreciate you being online to present. Thank you. That moves us into the next around the dog control policy, and invite submission number 78, Dr. Alison Vaughan from the Royal New Zealand SPCA, to speak to us via Teams. Floor is yours. Welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. I will similarly attempt to get a very brief slideshow up and running.
Just, Alison, you're just a little bit softer, and we've got you as loud as we can get you. So if you can use a louder voice, some members would appreciate. Thank you.
Absolutely, I will aim to do that. So if you could let me know when you can see my screen, I will get stuck in.
Perfect.
Super. So thank you very much for the opportunity to present today, and we really want to commend Council on their proactive engagement with stakeholders. I am Dr. Alison Vaughan. I'm a scientific officer with SPCA, and I'll take SPCA's submission as read. But I did want to take this opportunity to highlight some key components from SPCA's submission, and especially a common thread that runs through all of them, which coincidentally we've been talking about in the previous hearing, which is human behaviour change and how to encourage responsible pet ownership. So SPCA and Council have a shared interest in promoting and encouraging responsible dog ownership. SPCA from an animal welfare perspective and Council from a management and control perspective. And we do also acknowledge that many who work for Council also very much personally care about the welfare of animals too. From SPCA's perspective, we were very pleased to see a number of the proposed changes to the dog control policy. SPCA advocates for evidence-based measures to achieve human behaviour change, such as community education, and we support the steps taken by Council to incentivise responsible dog ownership. I just want to touch on just 3 things. The first is the preferred dog owner scheme. So SPCA supports Council's preferred dog owner scheme to encourage responsible dog ownership, and we were really pleased to see the addition of emergency preparedness, both as a requirement for the scheme and throughout the dog control policy. Emergency preparedness is really important to protect animal welfare in emergencies, but it also impacts the willingness of people to evacuate in the event of an emergency, because many people will not leave if they have to leave their companion animal. So that was excellent to see. We're also very pleased to see that this Council offers an option to have an interview as an alternative to a written self-administered knowledge test. And this is because this reduces discrimination against prospective dog owners who may not be able to read and write at a proficient level, have English as a second language, or may have other factors which limit their ability to fill out written tests. And we do note a recent campaign by Citizens Advice Bureau that highlighted how vulnerable groups can be accommodated. This is really important because here in New Zealand, a survey conducted back in 2015 highlighted that 43% of adults aged 16 to 65 scored a level 2 proficiency in literacy. That is below the level of literacy needed for day-to-day life. And it's also important as socioeconomic status is linked to literacy. So an inclusive approach that promotes responsible dog ownership is required to ensure that this incentive is accessible to the groups who may benefit the most, especially in the context of our current cost of living crisis. So this is fantastic to see the Council offers this. We do encourage Council to consider further reducing barriers by exploring options for those who may have English as a second language. And one other point where there is an opportunity to reduce a barrier to accessing the preferred dog owner scheme is to consider a flexible approach to the fencing requirement, which is currently in place. So obviously SPCA is very keen that animals are appropriately contained, and both for the animal's welfare and for the community. But it is important to acknowledge that dogs can be provided with a safe environment for off-leash exercise without having a fully fenced property. So that may be people who live in apartments or other dwellings without a fenced yard, but who do meet their dog's exercise requirements through other means, such as providing regular walks, agility, or other activities. So we do know, and that's something we consider when we're rehoming dogs as well. People may not have a fully fenced yard, but if they have a secure property and they are committed to exercising their dog, that can also be a responsible dog owner. On the topic of exercise, you'll be aware that legally all dog owners must meet the physical health and behavioural needs of their animal, and providing sufficient exercise is part of this requirement. So the Code of Welfare for Dogs recommends 60 minutes of exercise a day. Some dog owners may be reluctant to exercise their dogs if they have flexibility about where they can do this in the local area, or if there isn't somewhere appropriate near to them. And so we do see that Council has a role to play in providing for the exercise and recreational needs of dogs and their owners. This is really important because evidence suggests that off-leash exercise areas benefit owners and dogs, both physical and mental health, as well as increased community connectedness. Dogs are a social lubricant. Many people find that they open up new connections. We are very aware that dogs walk faster than people. So on-leash exercise is not equivalent to off-leash exercise. It's really important that they have this opportunity to work off excess energy, but that should be in an appropriate space. And that's also important in terms of one of the biggest crises for dog welfare, which is obesity. It is the #1 globally health concern, and we know that dogs that are walked less often and for shorter time are more likely to be obese. So given the increasing number of registered dogs, there may be a need for Council to consider increased need for off-leash areas. we encourage council to engage with locals ahead to inform decision making ahead of any proposed dog access change to ensure that the areas are meeting the community's needs. And we would point council towards a recent consultation by Wellington City Council that was a really good example of how communities can be positively engaged to determine potential dog exercise areas. This is also, in terms of exercise, an issue for council because we know that dogs not provided appropriate outlet for their energy can develop problem behaviours such as nuisance barking. And providing exercise is a way of reducing that. And we do note that council reports an increase in complaints about barking dogs. That may be because there are more registered dogs in the area, but that's something to consider. And also in terms of barking complaints, SPCA is always happy to discuss with council advice on how they can manage those without use of shock collars, which some councils use. And then my final point I want to highlight is menacing dog classification. So menacing classification has direct negative impacts on a dog's welfare. And currently under the Dog Control Act, owners are entitled within 14 days of receiving a notice of classification to object in writing with regard to the classification. But generally, once they're classified as menacing, in most areas, they continue to carry this classification through their life. We have seen other councils look at this, and we encourage councils to consider providing owners of dogs classified as menacing due to behaviour with an opportunity to have the classification reviewed further down the track. If they're able to provide evidence of completing a training course or have a behaviour assessment report at the owner's expense, and the owner has not obtained any infringements within the 12-month period, and in some councils we've also seen a requirement that they are preferred dog owners. So this has been adopted in other areas, for example, Auckland City Council, and we've discussed how this has gone with the Auckland City Council, and from the animal control officer's point of view, this has been a really useful tool. So we aren't just labelling dogs and owners, but also giving them a pathway to change their ways and become responsible dog owners. So both Council and SPCA have this shared goal of encouraging responsible dog ownership for the benefit of dogs' welfare, but also for our communities. And with that, I will take questions.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughan. I'll open it up for questions. Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Dr. Vaughan. I'm interested in your last comments about the review of menacing classification as an option. In terms of the negative effects on welfare of a menacing classification, is that because the dog has to be muzzled and on a lead when out in public and therefore isn't able to exercise? Or what is your view of the negative effects on welfare of having a menacing classification on your dog?
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Thank you for asking. So partly it is, as you said, the requirement to be wearing a muzzle for often quite extended periods of times if you want to go out in public. But also it can limit people's options in terms of housing. So some places may not allow you to rent a property if your dog has menacing classification. So that can limit people's options. It also limits people's ability to access these other benefits, and for their dogs also to be able to socialise and to be able to access places like boarding kennels, like doggy daycares, for example. And so we do acknowledge that there is a balance to be found, but what we really want to see is these dogs that carry menacing classification, and especially their owners, to take steps to change their behaviour and to adopt responsible dog ownership. It should be noted that we're talking about menacing dogs and not a dangerous classification. Menacing dogs can be classified for sort of obnoxious behaviours. So there's a sort of sliding scale. And so we'd urge Council to use their discretion when looking at reviewing these.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Vaughan. There's no further questions. Thank you very much for presenting today. That moves us into the officers' report, and I invite... we don't have an officers' report. We did it last meeting. Okay, thank you. So that concludes both those two items. the hearing of submissions for 11 and 12. That moves us into item 13. And I will invite the officer this time, Bryce Hoskins, Group Manager for Property and Resource Recovery for the Ongley Park Road proposal to continue supporting Manawatu Cricket Incorporated by notifying the intention to grant occupancy via a lease of council land and buildings. Bryce, floor is yours.
Morena again. Reflecting on comments from the council earlier around the process, unfortunately this is step one in the process. So there's a little bit more to be done from here, but essentially, just for clarity, all this step is simply seeking permission to go out and consult with the public on entering a new lease. Papers will then be brought back to review any submissions, and then subsequently you'll be able to then make a decision on whether to actually go ahead with the lease or not. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Bryce. Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions, Bryce. One, I'm sure it's in here, but I've missed it. How long have they been in this site for?
They've been here since 2012.
Okay, and so in the spirit of the questions around efficiency, I'm just wondering, do we have control over setting the 5-year period that we'd be granting this lease for, or could we make it 8 years or 10 years? Do we have that discretion, or is that set out in the Act?
No, we have some discretion there. 5+5, for instance, is a standard community lease that we have been implementing over the last many few years. There is a maximum term we can do, so we can't exceed, I think it's 40 years, I believe it is, or 39 for a maximum term of a lease. But yes, I mean, essentially we could, and we have from time to time, voted to do, say, a 10+10 or something like that.
And just remind me, with that +5, we'd still go through this process again?
No, so by doing a 5+5, it means at renewal time we can simply activate a renewal. It's only when the lease is up for a new lease.
That's good to know. And so I've asked this question before, but would you mind just reminding us the logic in only doing 5 years, not say 10+10?
It's not necessarily anchored in anything other than this is essentially a 10-year lease. From council's perspective, it does provide a strategic opportunity that we're only locking ourselves in for a 10-year period, for instance. Appreciating that that's not to say that we would not enter another lease again with Manawatu Cricket at the end of it, but it does provide us an opportunity. If you did, say, a 10+10+10 type lease, then you would not be having another opportunity to even consider anything in relation to this for 30 years, which is quite a while.
So bear with me, Mr. Chair, here. So my understanding, though, with the 5+5 renewal is that at that point of renewal, we still do have some optionality if they were, say, a bad tenant or we wanted to change. I mean, that in the commercial market at the renewal time, you still have some optionality. Is that the case here?
No, it is. So if they weren't paying the rent or they weren't operating under the prescribed use of the tenancy or all of those things, we do have options like we would in any other situation.
So my final question then is, could we do 5+5+5+5 and save ourselves from having to go through this process in 10 years' time, and say if it's going well, we can just roll it on for 20 years?
That is within council's delegation to make that call if that's what you'd like us to propose.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Wood's questioning has just prompted just one very quick question for me. Has Manawatu Cricket expressed an interest in a longer term lease, or is this is what they're happy with?
In our discussions, we've talked about 5+5, which they are happy with. That's not to say they wouldn't be happy with a longer lease, but we haven't explicitly raised that with them.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Bryce.
Thank you, Bryce. There's no further questions, so I'll move the recommendations before us that the committee continue to support Manawatu Cricket Incorporated by notifying the public of its intention to grant occupancy of council land and buildings at Ongley Park Road, Palmerston North, in accordance with the Support and Funding Policy 2022 and Section 54 of the Reserves Act 1977. And 2, the committee note the land affected by the occupancy of Manawatu Cricket Incorporated is described as Lot 2 DP 77988, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comments or debate. Councillor Meehan. Floor's
Thank you,
yours.
Mr. Chair. Just to clarify, Bryce, I fully understand it's not our officers setting the process. I know it's down the line, and it still doesn't change anything. I'm still pretty disappointed with all the red tape. Thank you.
Great, thank you. There's no further members wishing to comment, so I'll invite a vote. That is passed unanimously, 12 votes for. Moving us to item 14. Welcome you back, Bryce. To present the next report, item 14, 154 Centennial Drive, the Chalet, proposal to grant a lease for part of the council building and land to Palmerston North Canoe Club Incorporated. Bryce.
Morena, so this one is a little bit different from the previous ones. And given a reflection that they, Canoe Club, part own the building, in fact, they own the majority share in the building. There is some work to be done at this building, and so they have requested some additional certainty. So this lease is actually being proposed to be 5 + 5 + 5. To provide that, the building is earthquake prone and the like, so we'll be working through that with them in the coming years. Essentially, this is a relatively long-term or long-standing lease. However, my reflection would be that the process has been a little bit muddly and difficult to administer in the past, with a relatively complicated, by comparison to our other leases, equation that has to be used to be figuring out rentals. There is a commercial sublease in place and has been for some time in terms of the first floor, operating as the boat shed, which hold a whole variety of weddings and catering exercises like that and functions. And so we historically have taken a portion of that as well. So really looking to take this opportunity to make this a heck of a lot simpler for all parties, really, including the Canoe Club. Whereby we simply have a clean-cut lease with them, and then they can enter in and negotiate and essentially administer the sublease themselves. So the actual impact on that has been attached in a confidential Part 2 item, and that's really just a reflection of the commercial nature of the subtenant and how that works. So happy to take any questions at this stage.
Thank you, Bryce. And as Chair, I'd also just want to reference the Part 2 item with commercial activities being the reason why it's Part 2, which did outline the breakdown of the lease arrangements. If there's any questions relating to that, we would need to wait and go into Part 2. But the thought was that it might be just helpful for context, and we won't need to go into Part 2. But if we do, that opportunity or that process would need to take place. So again, opening it up for questions. Councillor Naylor.
Yeah, thanks, Bryce. Just in 2.4 and 2.5, it talks about the part ownership of the building by the tenant and council, and then in 2.5 it says that the ownership share is not changing. I'm just wondering, is there any potential for this building to be included in the work that council will undertake around leveraging council's assets?
Probably the simple answer is it could be. I don't, and in the absence of our CE being here, I don't think anything's off the table for that process necessarily, and we'll be looking at all buildings in our portfolio and what we can do in that space.
And if we had a building like this that was part owned and we wanted to make any changes, if we had a lease arrangement in place, how would that impact that?
By making this lease a lot more simpler, the flow on for that is it does actually make those conversations a heck of a lot easier in the long term. should we choose to divest the building and essentially the canoe club would own it in its entirety, for instance, the lease would be relatively, is a lot more simpler than that. Equally the other way, if the canoe club was to sell their share to council and we own the whole building, again, that probably makes it a lot easier. In the old relationship where it was leveraging off a whole bunch of percentages of certain things, that probably overcomplicated the issue even further. So I don't, to answer your question simply, I don't think this lease stands in the way of that at all. Should something change in the future around the ownership model, we can simply do a variation to the lease at that point.
Okay, thank you. And just further to that, you mentioned that there was some earthquake issues with the building. So in terms of any work that's done, is the cost of that shared between the owners and the percentage that's outlined there, or how does that investment work?
So it should be, yes. So I answer it that way in terms of, because I mean in theory the way it should be working is we would only pay 44.6% of the cost, and the canoe club would fund the balance of any work. Where that does get a little bit complicated is around the canoe club's opportunity to secure funding. So they're quite often having to try and secure funds through external funding opportunities and trying to do fundraising in that respect to do things. In the past, we have proceeded with work 100% funded by council, depending on what it was and how urgent it was, and an absence of opportunity. Equally, I think it would be a fair reflection to say there is a number of works that probably need to be done to the building. If I really put my facilities management hat on, however, we've had to defer those in an effort for the canoe club to try and get some external funding to contribute. So it sometimes can actually add a bit of a barrier to work being done, but I can give assurance if anything is, say, health and safety related or urgent, then we have in the past moved those kind of works through anyway.
And just final question, so have the work that does need doing to this building, have we got any funding included in our long-term plan currently for that?
Yep, we would facilitate this through the recreational facilities renewals program. So it's a rolling program over the 10-year period. It's not explicitly outlined in there, but it is a project conceivably that would be undertaken through that program.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There's no further questions. Thank you, Bryce. So I'll move the recommendation before us that the Strategy and Finance Committee grant a lease of land and buildings at 154 Centenary Drive, the Chalet, Palmerston, described as part lot 3 DP 1332 to Palmerston North Canoe Club Incorporated, in accordance with Section 54 of the Reserves Act 1977. That's seconded by Councillor Naylor. Open it up for any comments or debate. There being none, I'd like to invite a vote. That's passed unanimously, 10 votes for. That moves us to item 15. There's no need for officer comment, but open to answering any questions from members. There being none, I'll move that the Strategy and Finance Committee receive its work schedule dated April 24, seconded by Councillor Naylor. Invite a vote. Passed unanimously, 10 votes for. And now I'd like to call on Councillor Fitzgerald to close us with karakia.
Kia ora tātou tēnā koe e te tiamana. Kia tau ai te mauri tū, te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumie, huie, tāki e.
Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. Thank you, members. Thank you, staff. That now concludes our meeting. Thank you.